Welcome to another episode of Teen Minds Redefined, where we redefine our relationships with our teens and their navigating high school and beyond. And today I have a beautiful guest, Kim Elder. I'm so excited to have her. We kind of connected, as usual, what you do on social media, and she had a topic that I have been dying to address. So I'm going to start off telling you all about Kim, and then we are diving in. Kim Elder is an entrepreneur through and through. She founded Bridgetown Files in 2018 with the goal of providing excellent care for busy real estate agents in Oregon. Bridgetown has now grown to a team of 8. Just this past year began offering social media and marketing support in addition to their extensive menu of transactional support. When she's not busy leading her team and dreaming up new business ventures, you will find her at home with her husband, her 9-year-old son, Malachi, and her 17-year-old stepson, Tyler. They became a blended family of 5 with children ranging from 5 to 18 in 2020, shortly before the world came to a halt. I'm breaking up in a rash just thinking about that. And what a journey it's been. Kim is passionate about navigating motherhood as she also processes and unravels her own parented methods from childhood. She has also learned to navigate stepping into the role of stepmom to 2 teenagers from the position of being a mom and a stepmom in 2 different co-parenting situations. Kim is learning every day the importance of extending grace, putting yourself in other shoes, and loving on kiddos through all the emotions that come from divorce and blended families. And thank you for joining me. And I know it's a very successful real estate, but I wanted you to talk about, I wanted us to talk about the co-parenting after divorce. So fill me in what I missed in your bio, what you want our listeners to hear about you, and we'll dive in.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I get asked to speak a lot in the entrepreneur world and the women in small business world. But I think the parenting, the blended family, second marriage, that is all such a huge part of my life. And also a topic I'm very passionate about, family as a whole. So I was married young and divorced before I was 30. And my first husband chose to leave our family when my son was 10 months old. So I found myself kind of in a very sudden situation where I was alone and I had a very small child to care for. And shortly after that, I met my second husband. And I was very much in love with him from the beginning, but very much like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. So we dated for about 4 years before we entertained any idea of marriage or moving in together or anything like that. He had also been married previously and had 2 children. And when we met, I was trying to do the math. I'm trying to remember. I think that his kids were 14 and 9 when we met, if I remember right. And my son was tiny. So we had a wide range going on. And his kids actually had lived in full-time in California and we were in Oregon. So when we first started dating, we really only had to contend with my son and the co-parenting situation with my ex-husband. But shortly after that, his children moved to Oregon and we did get married literally 3 weeks before COVID.
Oh my God.
And all of us under one roof, which was quite the adventure. So we had a 5-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 18-year-old. So that was very exciting. We bought a new house for all of us to fit in, and we purposefully bought one that was larger so we could try to give everyone their own safe space, their own corner. His kids, who at the time, like I said, were 13 and 18, they were with us full time, and my son was with us 50% of the time. So he'd be here for a week and gone for a week. And we sort of fell into this pattern of when Malachi, the youngest, was here, everyone was kind of bonding as a whole, and then he would leave, and it was almost like the reason for us to bond and stay together left with him. And so it kind of created this weird roller coaster of chaos where I think the teenagers in the house kind of felt that they had freedom that week that he was gone to kind of just release, which is good. We want that, right? But it also made it very difficult on my husband and I to be there for them how they needed us to be there. So unfortunately, just for a myriad of reasons, his oldest child, who was 18, she was here for about 6 months before she said, this is just too much for me. And it was a lot. It was too much for all of us. It was a lot. So she moved back to California to be closer to her mom. And then Tyler stayed and is still here with us. So I think that first year was really hard. And now I think you're always learning. It never stops. I have people that will say, oh, I just had a baby. I can't wait till they get to this stage and I can, forget about it. I'm like, it just evolves. It doesn't ever go away. My husband's oldest is 22 now. And, we still parent her, but in a very different way. Obviously you're there in a very different way. So, but that's kind of our general story. So we have my ex-husband that we co-parent with, and then my husband's ex-wife that we co-parent with. My ex-husband has a partner. And so we've, had to kind of learn what that looks like too. The dynamics are always changing, always evolving. And that's why I said, I think the biggest piece I've learned is to give grace, and honestly, give grace to yourself first, because it's freaking hard. It is so freaking hard, but also grace to your partner and to their ex-partner. Because if you can't all get along, ultimately the kids pay the biggest price. And that is not ever going to be a good thing for us. So yeah, that's kind of our story in a nutshell.
I'm so stuck on the fact it was right before COVID.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I can't even.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I can't either. I still have PTSD from that.
I mean, just to be not stuck with, that's a terrible thing. To be confined with just a partner who you love without any extending circumstances would be hard enough, and then throw all that in. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say, before we even start, that what we're talking about, or at least my perspective of things, I know are not the same for everybody. And when I talk about positive co-parenting and exes and all of that, it has nothing to do, it's a different story with abuse or addiction or any of that. So I just want to put that disclaimer out right there. Please don't think that I think that everybody needs to be blah, blah, blah. Nope, that's not it. So I'm just talking about in general, and from you and I, our experiences, how we cope with, how we manage co-parenting and what we're thinking about it. So there's so many different layers to this. And so I got married very young, but we were married for 20 years, and then we divorced. And the first year or so of that was very, very challenging, of course. But what made me want to talk about this is, now my son is 34, my daughter's 30, she just got married, my son just got engaged, and my ex and I are, I should call him the father of my children. We're very, very close. He actually does my hair. So I let him near me. Amazing. I let him near me with scissors. So
I love that.
So we get along, and that's how we started. Actually, we started out as hairdressers and owning businesses and blah, blah, blah. So
wow, that's awesome.
I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, right after my son got engaged, and he was on the phone and he said, oh, I called to congratulate us. And I said, yeah, this is really great. I'm so excited. And I said, I think our kids are doing okay, considering. And I don't think we F them up too much.
Yeah.
And we may have, they just haven't told us. But
yeah.
He said, we're really lucky. And I said, you know what? We're not lucky. We worked so hard because we knew what it meant to them. Like, we just worked our asses off, and sometimes I messed up, sometimes he messed up, but we were very quick to give ourselves
Yeah.
and each other grace and work it out.
Yeah.
And at my daughter's wedding, in my speech, I said, thank you
Mhm.
to the best co-parent I could ever ask for.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because, and it's true, it's true. Yeah, we had some stuff, but there's so much to unpack, because I feel like you can get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it means so many things. And one thing it means to me is that you are not spending any of your separated time leaning on your kids as your confidant,
Oh my gosh,
best
yes.
friend, or in hopes of gaining their loyalty or their understanding, because you feel like a big bag of shit because you got divorced.
Yep.
And 100%. You do.
Yep.
So talk to me about that. How are you feeling about that? And
oh my gosh, I have so much to say about that. So my first marriage ended because of my first husband's infidelity. It was very sudden for me. So I knew something was wrong, but I did never in a million years would have guessed that that's what was happening. And so I think for me, I had to embrace and process my own stuff. I mean, your identity, for me anyway, my identity as a wife and how I wanted to show up as a mom, and my future, it was all taken away from me pretty much overnight. I mean, it was like one day it was there and the next day it was gone. And so I think that a lot of times the story goes, right? Mom is bitter, mom holds on to that, your dad's a shitbag, he can't do anything right. And you hold on to that bitterness, right? And so within probably, I don't know, maybe even a week, I was like, I need to process this for myself, my stuff first, and move past it, because Malachi does not deserve to have my stuff put on him. His dad had an affair and left me, but his dad is not leaving him. And so I think that your ability to do that, especially when you're going through your own trauma and processing your own grief, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't wish it on anyone, but it is literally so vital to be able to say, this happened to me, but what am I going to do for my son? And so that fight, to be better for him, to be strong for him. By no means do I intend on hiding the truth. I mean, he's asked some questions. He's 9, so he hasn't asked a ton of questions. And I did tell my ex-husband from the very beginning, I said, I'm never going to lie to my son. I'm never going to lie. The truth is what it is, and it's not pretty. But at the end of the day, I will do whatever I can to support you in being his dad, because ultimately that is what is most important, is his relationship with you, and with me too, obviously. But yeah, I think that's the key component. Like you're saying, is it takes so much work to be able to put yourself aside, your own trauma, your own whatever, and not let that seep into how your child views their other parent. In the future, if he finds the truth out and, puts this puzzle together and makes decisions for himself, that's his decision. I can't control that, but I will not speak ill of his dad just to make myself feel better or to try to gain his loyalty or, anything like that. It's just so important to not do that.
Well, and what I always say to people when they start hammering on their exes is like, listen, they are 50% your ex.
Oh, yes.
So you call him an asshole.
Yep.
Guess who else you're calling 50% an asshole? I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
but I seriously think that is so. Put it on a Post-it note on your fridge if you have to. But every time you slam them, you're slamming him or her.
Yes, every time.
Your partner, ex-partner. Right. So yeah, that just, so that's something that I think that's one thing I tried so hard to follow from the start. Yeah. And I mean, he was in my family for 25 years. He still is a very big part of the family.
Right.
So, and the comfort I think that my kids feel when we are all in the same room, like when his parents passed, I was 100% there at the hospital.
Yeah.
When my
Yeah.
dad recently passed, he was at the hospital. Everyone was
Yeah.
at the celebration of like, and the kids didn't have to go, oh, they're going to be
Yes.
in the same room. Like,
Exactly.
I think it gets on
Exactly.
their nerves more that we get along and bug them. But
Yeah, they're like, this is weird.
yeah, so lame.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. Because at one point, and this is what I had so many, especially girlfriends, right? They're like, oh, what a jerk, blah, 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 all this stuff. And while I definitely had my moments where, yes, that has happened multiple times in my brain, and out loud, but ultimately for me, I just kept saying, but at one point, I loved this person. And at one point, I committed my life to this person, and I had a child with this person, and I wanted future with this person. And so, despite how it ended, whether it's fair or not or whatever, I still loved this person for a reason.
Yeah.
And I choose to focus on that and let that steer the ship, let that steer the relationship, that we come back to as co-parents. And I think ultimately that's all you can do. I mean, it really is. It's the best way to do it.
100%. I so agree. Okay, so let's talk about step parenting.
Yeah.
And how that feels. And I feel like, I'm even in a lot of these Facebook groups for parents of divorce and
Mhm.
co-parenting. And a lot of people are stepmoms or
Mhm.
stepdads. I'm not gender biased, sorry, are saying, oh, I treat them like my own and I give them everything and we tell them everything and they still treat me like crap and they still do
Mhm.
this and they still do that. And most of my responses are, they don't want you to treat them like your own because
Nope.
they have another parent
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes.
And so let's start there. And then let's
Yeah.
start with, yes, I'm going to get this angry 12-year-old stepdaughter in my house.
Yep.
But guess what? Guess what represents the fact that they're not together anymore?
Mhm.
Even if it wasn't my fault, even
Yep.
if I came in 5 years later, doesn't matter.
Yep.
My parents aren't together and you're trying to parent me and I'm
Yes.
angry. You screwed up my life. You screwed up my friendships. I have to go back and forth to 2 houses. I have to have, and I love the whole, oh, you get to have 2 Christmases. No. That's not a good thing.
It's not
you
a good
have to split your time between
Yes.
2 Christmases. So that's
Yep.
so talk to me about putting yourself in the kid's shoes, like what
Yes.
that must feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually exactly what I do. I didn't do it in the beginning, so I want to be very clear on that. But it took me a little while to go, oh, wait a minute. I do this with Malachi, my son, when he goes back and forth between my house and his dad's house. Why am I not doing this with my stepchildren? And that really shifted for me when I started to go, I have to look at this from the same perspective. And I actually hate when people say, oh, I love them like my own kids. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. You can't. You cannot. It is a completely different bond. You can love them with an intense love. You can love them and have all of those mom feelings, but it will never be exactly the same. It just won't. And so I think for me, I'm very careful on how I say that, and when I'm expressing love, because for me, it is, I chose you. I chose to love you, and I choose every day to stay here and love you. And so I think, again, putting yourself in their shoes, yeah, they didn't ask for it. Even if, my husband and his ex-wife, their divorce had been final years and years and years before I ever came on the scene. But even as a kid, and I remember this from my own childhood, there's always kind of this like whimsical hope, right? Like maybe mom and dad will get back together. Maybe there will be this like full family unit. And that's normal and natural. And it is not my job to come in and take that dream away and insert myself, where I'm not wanted. And I think too, even my stepdaughter, she was about 14 or 15, I think at the time, maybe 16. And she said, real randomly, she said, I want to call you mom. And I said, that is a huge honor. And I'm so grateful that you feel that you have that relationship with me and that bond with me, but I am not your mom. And at the time, my husband,
Wow.
we were not married either. We weren't living together. And I said, I just really want you to think about that, because your mom can never be replaced. It's a high, high honor. And no matter what your relationship is with your mom, she will always be your mom. And I said, so as much as I love that, I would love it if you called me something different. If you had a different word for me, um, or just call me my name, whatever you want to call me, because for me, it was, how would I feel if Malachi was saying that to another mom? I would want that mom to give me that respect, to give me that place. And
That's
so
so generous that you did that.
thank you.
So
Thank you.
generous.
Yeah.
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 It's so important, because I'm not here to step on toes. I'm not here to take over. I can be a person of influence in your life and help you and guide you. But I can never replace. And I think validating that for her and her mom, whether or not it made it back to her mom, I don't know, is so important to me. I think it's just vital that you hold on to that as the mom, right? But yeah, so anyway, I'm losing my train of thought there. Sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, I think that is key, when you can put yourself in the kid's shoes
Yeah.
and really think, what is she asking when she says that? What is she asking, and how can I, as the grown up, guide her through this, come alongside her and still love her and be there for her, but not be a replacement and not be a distraction.
I love that. I want to soak that in, because I think that's so important. Okay, so now let's talk about kids acting out at home, and this conversation. This is something I always hear as well, is oh, they don't do that with me, or they don't do that with me. They don't have that behavior with me. And so I always kind of think, if a kid is really communicating, that's what I call behavior. If a kid is communicating,
absolutely,
but they're communicating loudly or aggressively or whatever with a certain parent, I feel like that's their safe space.
Yeah.
That's their, hey, I can do whatever I want, and you're
Yep.
going to love me, and it's okay.
Yep.
And I'm on my best behavior over here, because I'm not sure how that's going to go if the real me pops out every once in a while. And we know it, especially, teenagers and what they go through. Like, life is hard enough.
Yeah.
Let's throw in divorce. Let's throw in step parents. Let's throw in, and oh my God. And I can't even, I have empathy for my kids having to go through it, and it goes in my head all the time, and I'm always thinking about it, especially with Christmas coming. Now I'm like, I don't care if we celebrate Christmas in January.
Yeah.
You do whatever makes you happy. You have your own
100%.
traditions. You have your own this. I don't care. But so I think when kids are really not feeling inhibited, that to me is almost a good sign.
It is. Yeah. That's funny that you say that, because my husband and I go to therapy about once every other week or once a week, depending. And we have for a little over a year now. And one of the very first things that our therapist said to us was, when so-and-so is acting out, or so-and-so is expressing, or so-and-so is having this moment, it's because they feel safe. It's because they know that they can express themselves on an extreme level, and you're still going to be there for them. You're still going to love them, and you're still going to be consistent with them. Yeah. And so I think that, when my stepdaughter was living with us, she was processing her own stuff. She had her own stuff that she was going through, and she was expressing and needed that support. But it's also something too, especially as the child gets older. In her case, she was 18. If they haven't also been taught how to receive it, when you give the support, that's where you start to see this major conflict, right? Whereas, with our younger kids, Tyler was 13 when we moved in together, and suddenly he had a little brother. He'd always been the little brother, now he has a little brother, and so we did see a little bit of that in the beginning, but he also was so much younger and able to receive that support as we gave it. And I think that that's the hardest part, again, with the older kids, is they've already kind of learned behaviors and learned patterns, and it's harder to kind of break through that. Not saying that we haven't, because we have now. My stepdaughter and I have had our ups and downs for sure, but we've had some amazing, beautiful moments where we've been able to say, I see you, I hear you. And so that's amazing. But yeah, I think when kids are in that place where they're expressing, I do think you're right. I think it's because they feel safe and that they can. Flip side, my son challenges his dad more than he challenges me in some areas, because he knows, he's going through that 9-year-old phase where he can kind of play it a little bit. He can kind of tweak it a little bit. And the response is going to be a little bit different in each house. So I think there's a little bit of that at play as well in the younger ages. But yeah, pay attention to that. What is your kid telling you? There's the saying, and hopefully I don't mess this up, but it's, the kids who ask for love in the worst ways are the ones who need it the most. Or something to that extent. And I think you really have to kind of tune into that and pay attention. What are they saying? What is that underlying issue of anger, or sadness, or standoffishness, or whatever it is, and give them some space. Give yourself some space. That's the key. I'm a reactor, my husband's not. So for me, I'm like at a 10. I'm ready to go. Let's fight it out. I have to take a step back. I have to say, okay, I see you, I hear you, give me a minute. I'm not great at it all the time. None of us ever are. But it's something I'm always trying to be very aware of, very conscious of.
And I also think too that, when we first split up, before we split up, my son and I were super, super, super close. And both my kids and I were super close. But I did notice once we split up, that changed. And I feel like that changed because he had this intense sense of loyalty to his dad. And I don't know, I just feel like, and I don't know if that's typical or gender. I don't know, but that's kind of what I started seeing. I was like, oh my God, we never have, like, this isn't us. What happened? Well, hello, I screwed up your life, first of all. And second of all, we grieve our separation differently. So he would see his dad grieving our separation in one way and then feel this intense loyalty. And then here's me able at that point, maybe able to handle things better or be able to look like I'm handling things better. And so it's like, you just ripped my dad's heart out and you're okay. And that sense of, I do wish, my biggest regret is not putting my kids in therapy right away, because I thought we had it. Like I thought, and I didn't really know a whole lot of women in my circle or people in my circle who were divorced. My parents were married 62 years. His parents were married 60 years. So I couldn't even put myself in their shoes.
Right.
So there's a lot of things, had I been able to anticipate, I 100% would have said, let's just do even family therapy, the four of us or the two of them. So I would have loved to have given them the outlet to not have anybody we know and just say what they need to say.
Whatever
I think that would have been really helpful. That is something that sits with me that I wish I had have done. So, and that's why I talk about it now. It's like, just do it. Just do it. You might seem very happy and everybody's okay, but maybe not.
Yep. Well, and I think giving a little bit of freedom with therapy too. I've had some friends who've gone through divorce where they just like, we're all going to therapy, and they kind of force the kids into it. And they, kids are like, I already have so much change and I already have so much going on. And now you want me to talk to this stranger, and I don't know. And then some therapists are like reporting back to the parents. So like, is it safe? It just becomes kind of this thing. So for me, I have taken the approach of, we're very open that I go one-on-one with a therapist, my husband does, and we go together. Um, and we're very open. It's on the family calendar. This is what we do. We talk about very openly with our kids. Oh, we're talking about how to navigate this. And, our therapist, Jim, he's been very helpful with this sort of thing. And I think it's more about being open and letting them decide, instead of, well, this is what we should do because this is what everybody should do and we're just going to do it. My 9-year-old actually asked me recently, he was looking at the calendar while he was eating his breakfast, and he goes, Mom, what does that mean when it says therapy? And I broke my foot a few years ago, so he automatically thought it was physical therapy. And I said, no. I said, so I explained, right? Why we go, why I go. And he said, well, sometimes it has you and Seth, and sometimes it just has you. And so I explained that dynamic, and I just left the door open for him. I said, this is a really good opportunity for me to be able to speak to someone who has knowledge, who has an openness. They can hear me. They're not in our family. I said, and so sometimes it's really helpful. And sometimes I go for a little while, and sometimes I go for a long time. I said, and if you ever want that for you, just tell me, because your dad and I will work it out. We'll figure it out for you so that you have that as an option. And he left that conversation going, because it was like, I think it's there for him someday, but I don't want him to feel like he has to go and he has to get all this stuff out and he has to talk to somebody. I'd rather him feel like, oh, I have some options. And I said, sometimes there's something that comes up you don't want mom to know. And that's okay if you don't want me to know, but you do have to tell somebody. Somebody has to know. And you're not alone in processing anything or thinking about these thoughts. So I think that, not to challenge you, but also to comfort you maybe, in that I think it's okay that you didn't make that decision and say, we're just going to do this thing, because they will navigate it in their adult lives on their own, and they will heal. And I'm sure they already have healed in many ways. So just as a comfort.
Thank you. And I'd like to think so. It's funny. I think I said this to my daughter one day. I don't think I fucked you up too much. And she said, yeah. Okay, and she's actually my editor for the podcast, so this is going to go over real well. We'll see if she gets rid of that or not.
That's so funny. That's hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So one other thing I think I want to talk about is, what's your relationship, and you don't have to answer this, what is a good idea of a relationship with the other parent? So with your husband's new wife, or your ex-husband's wife, or like, how do you navigate that?
Oh, that is sticky and tricky.
And feel free to opt out. That's totally fine.
No, I'm always an open book. This topic has been one that I've actually openly blogged about as I was still going through my divorce. So nothing is off limits there for me. I think going back to knowing that ultimately the goal is my son being happy and healthy, and always remembering that is the goal. Because while you may have picked his parents, for me, I obviously picked my ex-husband. I don't get to pick his new partner. I don't get to pick her past. I don't get to pick how she parents. She doesn't have any children of her own. And so my son really is the only child in that sense. And so I think in the very beginning, it was heartbreaking for me, because how I wanted to be a mom had to change. And it took me a little while to understand that. I thought that maybe I could still be the kind of mom I wanted to be, and also straddle this, new relationship and situation. And honestly, it's letting go of that. I think the more you hold on and white knuckle it, the more angry you get and the bitterness builds up. So for me, it was, okay, I have to change how I parent my son, because now I'm not just parenting my son with my ex-husband. There's multiple adults in here, and I have to be open and know when to stand your ground and when it's not worth a fight. There's definitely some things that I've pushed back and said, sorry, that doesn't work for me. This is not okay for me. But I would say it's probably one in out of every 10 that I actually push back on. And the rest of it, I just kind of go, okay, it's not what I would have chosen. But I look at my son and he's happy and healthy. And I go, okay, then it's fine, you know? So that's how I have navigated that. The alternative of being, you know, the new wife, the stepmom, all of that, it's very similar. I approach it very similarly. I look at a lot of it is putting myself in the mom shoes and saying, yeah, maybe I don't agree with that, but I'm not the mom. And, you know, I think that had to change for me too when the kids were moving up here and living with us full time. Because before it had been like summer break and Christmas break, and it was very fun and whimsical, and we could do all these cool things, and then they would go home. And then it was like, oh, they're here all the time. They're never going home. And so they get to see, you know, the ugly sides of me. I get to see the ugly sides of them. And then it's real. And so I think also recognizing for me, especially walking into it when they're older, they've been raised by someone else and they're someone else's children. So while they might be under my roof and, you know, I'm helping to fund their food and clothes and all the stuff, you know, they're not my children. And their mom has a hope and a dream and a goal for them, just like I have for Malachi. And so while it may look vastly different and she might go about it completely different than I do, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're not my children. I'm here to be a support. I'm here to be a sounding board. I'm here to be a safe place. And I'm here to help with the logistics of you're growing up and you need new shoes and you need a lunch or you need money for this. That's my role in their lives. And should they choose to give me more of an in, that is a huge honor. And I take anything and everything I can get because I love when you get those wins, it is like you just won the lottery. But I don't expect them. I'm not out here laying down crazy expectations of a relationship. I'm just happy that I get to be here, and that I get to watch. And, you know, there's definitely conflict for sure with my husband and his ex-wife off and on, but I do my best to just really kind of stay Switzerland. I try to just be neutral, be the sounding board, be a support for my husband and my partner, and let him handle it, not take it on as my own issue. And he's done the same for me. You know, he's my support and everything when I go through situations with my ex-husband. But I would say 90% of the time, he just says, let me know if you need me. And I think that's huge. You know, it's massive to give that respect and be able to receive it back too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've kind of been in the same situation where, you know, I choose my hill to die on when the kids were younger. And I think there's probably been one time where it had been a complete blow up where it was just, I was so offended and so hurt for my kids.
Right.
But we got over it and that's fine. And essentially she loves my kids and she makes their dad happy. And that stays with me.
Absolutely.
So discipline. I get all this input about the discipline of the stepchildren, and my instinct is always, and the comments are, he doesn't discipline and he doesn't do this and my kids behave like this, and my first instinct is back the hell off.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are not putting your foot in this discipline thing. Just back off. And you agreed to this whole situation. That's part of the contract to me.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I could not agree with you more. I think that not only do you create such a huge divide between you and your stepchild, but you put so much more on yourself at that point than you need to. Also, therapy, 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 because, definitely, I think that my husband sometimes parents a little bit out of, I wouldn't say guilt so much as just like, I want to make life easier for you. And I don't want the conflict, and I don't want the bad, hard conversations. And it definitely took us going to therapy for our therapist to say to my husband, like, you can still be dad and still be a strong influence and have hard conversations that don't mean you are bad, or you are mean, or you are aggressive, or you are any of those things. You can have both in the same world. Again, personalities are so different, right? I see a bad behavior and I'm like, stop, that's it, we're not doing it again. It's my personality. I am very black and white. I don't live in gray very well. And my husband loves gray. He's a gray embracer. So being able to go into therapy and say, like, it's okay to kind of come together. And now it's so funny that we're talking about this today, even because a situation came up. It's a very simple situation, but my son, I was out of the room and my son asked my husband if he could have a brownie after dinner. And my husband said no. And I didn't know. And then I came in the room and 10 minutes later, my son says, can I have a brownie? And I said, sure. And my husband's like, what the heck? So he waited though. He waited for the 9-year-old. He left the room. And then he said, hey, I just want to let you know, this is what happened. And I was like, what the heck, you little jerk? So to my son, not my husband.
Yeah.
So when he came back in the room, I said, hey, dude, just want to let you know, this is what happened. And it's not acceptable. When Seth says no, the answer is no. So don't do it again. And my son is an empath. And so he immediately is teary. And I said, you're not in trouble, but I just want you to know that that's not okay. And that behavior stops right now. We're not doing that. Done. So every kid is different, right? They don't all respond the same. But I think for me with my stepchildren, it became this thing where I walked into the situation thinking, I have to be the one. I have to be the aggressor. I have to be the one that speaks up. I have to. And that was the biggest mistake I've ever made with co-parenting and step-parenting and all of it, because it's not my role. It's not my role. And it took me not very long to realize, A, it's not effective, and B, I'm stressed out more than anyone else in the situation by taking it on myself. Instead of just saying to my husband, hey, this is what I'm noticing. This is my input. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Another key thing is spouse to spouse. When you're talking about parenting your own kids, we do a lot of the asking of, do you want input or do you want an ear? Because sometimes, especially with teenagers, especially when they're having a hard month, year, I don't know.
Yes.
It's easy to just get caught up in that. And sometimes I say to my husband, hey, I just need to vent that I'm having a hard time with this, and I'm having a hard time with the attitude, or I'm having a hard time with whatever it may be. I'm not looking for a solution. I'm not looking for you to go talk to them. I just need to get it off my chest. And that helps a lot.
That's so
because it
important.
sets the expectation right out of the gates.
Yeah. I don't need a fixer. I don't need a fixer.
Yes.
I just need you to let it go in one ear, out the other.
Yes,
I don't even know if I want
absolutely.
your opinion. I just want to say it out loud. Yeah.
Yep. And also just, I think another key thing, partner to partner, is just thanking them for showing up with your kids. My husband thought he was done having kids, and he met me, and I had my son was 15 months old. And so he was starting over again. And I think just thanking them and saying, hey, this job is not easy. And sometimes it sucks. My husband has said that to me thousands of times. I know you walked into 2 teenagers. I know you walked into past traumas. And I just am grateful for you. I'm just grateful that you're here and that you stay here and that you're willing to fight through this with us. You just have to give that to your partner every once in a while, in order to make it work, really.
Yeah. And I think too, and this is where I think therapy really comes in, is being able to parent without the layer of guilt. And full disclosure, I still sit with, I made my kids a statistic. That phrase goes through my head much less now. And I like super close with my kids. We talk all the time. We're always close and together. And it's no reasons, I think, to but it was just that. And so I know as I was raising them as a separated or single mom, I know there were so many times where I sat back and went, oh, I did that out of guilt. I didn't do that because I was smart. I was like, oh, it's such a terrible feeling. And I think, honestly, that's just therapy's the only way to help you with that, I think, unless you're like so aware and so able to notice it in the moment. But, well,
and that is, I actually wrote down a note before we jumped on to record that I think the key thing that people forget about is that however you were parented and whatever you went through before you had a child of your own, you're going to bring all of that into your parenting. Just like, we hear it spoken about a lot more frequently with relationships. You're going to bring your past relationships in with you. You're going to bring your childhood in with you, but we do it with our kids too. And I think for me, it became, how was I parented? First of all, what did I like about it? What did I hate about it? How did it make me feel? I didn't meet my biological father until I was 18 years old. So I grew up feeling very left out, something's missing. And so for me, when I put my son into that situation, like, for example, when I was first going through my divorce, and everybody, including attorneys, were saying, you should fight for everything and take him and, whatever, and cut off this relationship. And for me, it was like, absolutely not. Like, that is not, I know how that feels, and I don't want that for my child. And same with my stepkids. If I isolate them or do something to make them feel isolated from their mom or their dad or whoever, I'm putting them in that exact same situation. So I think therapy is so important, to be able to take all your stuff that you have that's inevitable. We all have it. Process it. Because regardless of if you have the best intentions or not, it's going to come out in how you parent your kids. It's just a matter of time. And so being able to kind of work through that, heal what you can, and stop that cycle from just starting all over again with your kids. It's so important. So important.
Well, it's funny, not funny. In my family, we're huge people pleasers. My dad was, my mom most of the time, and 100% me. And so whenever we are trying to make arrangements with my two adult kids, so it's usually the group text saying, okay, we're going to play Tetris with Thanksgiving. Who's available when, blah, 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 blah. And it always starts off with, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Well, that doesn't matter. And then we call each other out now and say, okay, you're being a Pankhurst. Or I'll say, oh, that sounds very Pankhurst. and as much as I'm very proud of the Pankhurst name and how everything else behind it, that is definitely a sticking point that needs to be thought about, noticed, and removed. So many times. So at least it's, I think that's one step better, is at least we're recognizing it. Calling each other out.
Absolutely. It's key.
Yeah. Well, this has been even more than I thought. I'm so grateful for you doing this with me. I reached out and just said, somebody needs to talk to me about co-parenting, because I keep hearing this, and I just want to really emphasize some really important points that I think we went over. Tell me, or tell the audience, where we can find you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, is where I love to live. I am on Facebook as well, but I love Instagram at Mrs. Kimberly Elder. A lot of E's in there. But yeah, that's where I love to live most of the time. I'm very open and vulnerable on my social media about all the topics, co-parenting and divorce and my story and what I'm going through, because I think it's just so important to, when you learn something, share it, because someone else is going through the same thing. I guarantee it.
100%. And that's why I even wanted to talk about it, is when I look on these Facebook groups that I'm trying to help one person at a time with a response. And I was like, we need to have this conversation big time to more people.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I will put that in the show notes for sure. Any last words, any last pieces of great advice, anything you want to leave us with?
I think the thing that I always try to remember for myself, and I said it in the beginning, is just really honestly giving yourself some space and some grace. What you're going through is, as a co-parent or as a single parent or going through divorce, it is so hard. And it doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter if it's super amicable or not. It's a breaking of something that you thought was going to happen, and it's an embracing of something new, and that is challenging. And I think sometimes we just feel rushed to go to the next season and rushed to heal through it. It's okay to sit in the grief. It's okay to feel everything. And please, please, please go to therapy, but don't do it alone, and don't do it with your family. They already have their own stuff too. Not that they can't be there for you, but therapy is so helpful to be able to just bounce ideas, get it off your chest. For me, it's even like the mile marker, like, oh, I'm going to table that problem because I know I have therapy in 2 days. So it's just so important to give yourself that, I think, especially as moms, to give yourself that time to check out and say, I got to take care of myself. I got to take care of this and heal this. So,
and I'm going to add to that where I also think it's so important to remember that if you are the initiator of the separation, you are always 1,000 steps ahead of everybody else, because you don't think about it on Monday and separate on Tuesday.
Right.
Some people have this slow process of grief and release and recovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before the conversation even happens.
Yeah, so, that's so true.
Yeah, so I think that's something to always remember as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
Kim Elder, follow her. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Teen Minds Redefined, and thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.